Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the third and final edition of a very special webinar series on Time to Tame Typhoid, brought to you by Unipath Speciality Laboratory and Vanguard Diagnostics. I'm Veena Kohli, CEO of Vanguard Diagnostics, and it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce Dr. Ravi Gaur, who's graciously agreed to lead our discussions throughout this typhoid-focused webinar series. Dr. Gaur is the chairman of the Medical Advisory Committee at Unipath Speciality Labs in Ahmedabad, and he's the visionary behind DRG Labs. With over 30 years of experience in pathology, molecular biology, genomics, and immunology, Dr. Gaur is a distinguished oncopathologist. His unwavering passion is to steer the course of diagnostics towards personalized medicine and innovative technologies. Ladies and gentlemen, we are truly privileged to have distinguished domain experts with us, both from the Government of India and the industry as a panelist. So stay tuned as our experts share their invaluable insights on the vital topic of public awareness and strategies for typhoid diagnosis. Dr. Gaur, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Dr. Veena, for elaborate mention about me, and thank you so much. And I think it's my privilege to have all of you as leading distinguished experts in the field who are right on the screen right here in front of us. So I think let me start with it. Welcome to the third and the final webinar. We have done final series of the we have three webinars: Taming the Typhoid, and this is the third one. The previous ones were on typhoid and diagnostic challenges and advancement in typhoid diagnosis. Now, this is something which is important today. We're talking about public awareness and strategies for typhoid diagnosis. Now, it's my pleasure to have the senior and experts in their own field right here, and to introduce Dr. Kamini Walia. Dr. Kamini is a senior scientist in ICMR, and of course, she's a very well trained and very renowned figure. Everybody knows in the antimicrobial resistance. She's heading that forum, and she's been trained to especially antimicrobial resistance and public health issues, John Hopkins, and she's currently leading the task force from ICMR. Thank you, Dr. Kamini, for sparing your time, and I look forward to hearing your views as we move forward. Also with me, I have Dr. Pandya. Sir, it's a pleasure to have you here with us. And Pandya is a very, very senior microbiologist, almost like 40 years plus, and he's been academic for many years. I think many of us must have read his books also. But he's currently as a senior consultant microbiologist for Unipath Laboratories. And I think pleasure to have you, sir, and like to definitely hear you. What has happened 50 years back and what's going to happen, what's happening now, and probably we can connect the journey. And look forward to hearing you. Thank you, sir. Also, I have with me Lieutenant General Dr. Rajiv Gupta. Thank you, Rajiv, for being with us. And of course, Dr. Arun Gupta is, of course, a very well-known figure. And when we come to microbiology and virology, and of course, not only the operations and administrative skills, he has been consulted us. Currently, he is with the HOD and director for the ESI's Hospital and Medical College, which is in Faridabad. Thank you, Rajiv, and we look forward to hear from you and expert views as we move forward. Thank you for being here. Also with me, I have Dr. Vanitha Kothari. Dr. Vanitha, thank you so much for sparing your time. Dr. Vanitha is heads the labs, director of one of the largest lab in the Madhya Pradesh in Central India, the Central Lab, and I know her personally for many years, and her expertise into running various government schemes, various PPPs, the wellness programs, a new innovative tech introduction, I think is very well known. Ask anybody out there. And I think we look forward to hear from her experience what has been the journey and what is the future in stores for typhoid as we move forward. With this, I think I'd like to just say a few words before I start. Why this is typhoid awareness matters. That's the important question for us today. So the estimated national incidence of typhoid fever in India is about, I may not be correct or updated, but Kamini may be knowing better. But I think it's almost like, they say, 360 or 380 cases per 100,000 persons a year, with an annual estimate of 4.5 million cases and roughly about 9,000 deaths, assuming some case fatality rates. So there's a large burden of typhoid fever in India with substantial heterogeneity across the country with higher burden, especially in urban centers. And we don't know because this is not really document picture data is correct because many of them don't even report. We don't even come to know. Maybe it's higher. Worldwide, I think as a figure somewhere we picked up in 2019, they had an estimated figure of 10 to 11 million people got sick from typhoid and about 110,000 people die every year. That was the figure somewhere I got it from the WHO. Maybe I'm not updated. Maybe the future we'll have more figure. The biggest thing is it's easily preventable. Something was easily preventable. I think which is creating these kind of nuisance. I think we need to address, and that's where here today here for. It's a significant global health concern today, and understanding its causes, symptom prevention is essential. By being aware of being informed, we can protect ourselves and our loved ones, but you can also contribute to the well-being of our broader community. And typhoid fever continues to be a significant public health challenge due to a combination of factors: clean water, sanitation, contaminated food, and much more. The equally important is the emergence of the antibiotic-resistant strains, which is raising concerns about the effectiveness of the standard medication. Moreover, limited awareness and education about typhoid symptoms, prevention, complications, and then are leading to delayed early diagnosis and contributing to more complications and more longer chronic issues. Especially in densely populated areas with poor living conditions, the disease can persistently circulate and leading to outbreaks and high disease burden, and which we have seen actually in endemic zones here and there. And it can create local havoc with local population and to, of course, our well-being and healthcare. To address these challenges, we have these experts panel with us, and I'll now request Dr. Walia to probably open up the opening remarks and address us, her views, and how do we go about it, what is the situation, and what is the future in stake, and what's being done at all fronts, especially the government, and of course, what needs to be done from the public. Dr. Kamini, please.
Thank you, Dr. Gaur. And at the outset, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity so that this enables me to share the work that we are doing at ICMR on antimicrobial resistance. So I would just like to share my screen. Are you able to see my slides in the presentation mode?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, great.
But it's
So,
not. Okay.
Is it in the presentation mode now?
No. Just.
I'm actually moving the slides as well. Are the slides moving?
No.
Okay. 1 minute, I'll try again.
Yeah.
Are you able to see the slides?
Yes.
But not in the presentation mode?
No, not yet.
Okay, I will proceed like this only. I think there will be some issues with the presentation mode. In the interest of time, I will not waste much time here. Okay, so I think this is a very important topic, which I think this is the third webinar in the series. And the importance is there from the fact that, so many typhoid cases are reported across the country, yet because of the lack of the available diagnostics or the poor performance of the available diagnostics, there is still the understanding on the entire burden of the disease in the country is a gray zone for us. Now, AMR is an important public health challenge because of the morbidity and mortality and high economic burden that it incurs, especially in the low-income countries. And as per one of the latest reports, there were almost 4.95 million deaths associated with the bacterial AMR in 2019. And minded, these were pre-COVID figures. COVID also saw the deprioritization of antimicrobial stewardship efforts and excessive use of antimicrobials, which further led to increasing antimicrobial resistance. What we saw this is one of the ICMR unpublished data, that the incremental cost of treating any resistant infection in a government hospital was almost 40% higher than treating the non-resistant infection in Indian settings. What is actually leading this? It is the overuse of antibiotics, which is driving the entire burden of antimicrobial resistance and the trends as we see in our country. ICMR initiated the program on antimicrobial resistance in 2012, a little before that. And ICMR's initiative is focused on generating reliable evidence, the diagnostic stewardship, the antibiotic stewardship, infection control, understanding mechanisms of resistance, developing integrated platforms for One Health surveillance. And we, of course, support a lot of basic and clinical research with support from different partners. One of the major initiatives of ICMR has been the AMR surveillance network, which we undertake in 20 hospitals across the country. And we publish this data every year. Now, one of the main drawbacks of this particular initiative for typhoid is that most of the hospitals which are included in this network are the tertiary care hospitals. As a result, we are not able to bring out the exact burden or the quantum of typhoid infections, because as you all know, it is a community acquired infection, and most of the patients actually do not visit tertiary care, and they are treated in the community settings through GPs or other smaller hospitals, and we don't have access to that data. Nevertheless, the typhoid fever poses a significant health burden in developing nations. It is exacerbated by increasing resistance to antibiotics. Some of the data I will be sharing from this network. Accurate diagnosis and timely administration of appropriate antibiotics is most important for effective treatment, but diagnosing typhoid fever is challenging because its symptoms are also similar to other febrile illnesses. Culture remains and susceptibility test remains the gold standard and remains essential for prescribing appropriate treatment. And the impact of typhoid fever on the individual and communities is very, very profound. Now, this is one of the latest studies which was published in New England Journal of Medicine. And the estimated incidence of typhoid fever from hospital surveillance ranged from 12 to 1,622 cases per 100,000 child years among children between the ages of 6 months and 14 years, and 108 to 970 cases per 100,000 years in those who were 15 years and older. So as you can see, there is a very high burden among the younger age group. This group also found very high incidence in the urban settings, in the rural settings. So when our vaccination strategies are going to focus on the urban settings, we are completely going to be missing out on the rural settings, which also has a large burden of disease. Now, the typhoid has evolved in terms of drug resistance over all these years. And if we look at its evolution, we started seeing the chloramphenicol resistance almost in 1970s. This was followed by MDR outbreaks, resulting in the introduction of ciprofloxacin as one of the mainstay for treatments, resulting in ciprofloxacin clinical failures being reported close to end of 90s and 2000. This was followed by introduction of cephalosporins. Now which is currently the mainstay of typhoid treatment. And we are also now seeing increasing MICs to cephalosporins along with the poor clinical response. But what is alarming is that in spite of this being happening, we still do not have a good blood culture, nor a good except for blood culture, there are no good rapid point of care diagnostics which we can offer to the patients. Although the silver lining is that now we are seeing increasing sensitivity to chloramphenicol, ampicillin, and cotramoxazole. So the challenges of treating typhoid in India is that we saw the emergence of multi-drug resistant strains. Then now we are seeing third generation cephalosporins and azithromycin being used for treatment of fluoroquinolone resistant typhoid. The outbreaks of extensively drug-resistant strains have been reported in other Asian countries, which limit the treatment choices, and it actually poses a global threat. What we see from ICMR data, this is from our latest report, what we are seeing is that there is high susceptibility to cotramoxazole, azithromycin, ceftriaxone, and ampicillin in Salmonella typhi. Among paratyphi, again, we are seeing very low susceptibility to ciprofloxacin, just like Salmonella typhi, but it remains sensitive to other drugs. Recently, outbreaks of ceftriaxone resistant Salmonella typhi was also detected in Gujarat. 137 isolates were reported by 5 labs in Ahmedabad and Vadodara region. They were also subsequently reconfirmed in CMC Vellore. This was between January 22 and May 2023. But they remained sensitive to chloramphenicol as well as azithromycin. Now, what are the diagnostics which are currently available? There is blood culture, there is a culture of bone marrow, then there are serological tests like Vidal, there are some rapid diagnostic tests, and then there is PCRs, but they all have very low sensitivity and specificity except for the culture of bone marrow. But we all know how excruciating and painful the test is. And if as a country we have to depend on bone marrow for detection of typhoid, I think we as a country should be doing better. So way forward, as I see, is that we need to continue the surveillance at all levels of healthcare. We need to reduce the misuse of antibiotics for treatment of typhoid. We need to encourage the use of available diagnostics which have good sensitivity and specificity. I still see a lot of Vidal being used. Although ICMR's National Essential Diagnostic List does not mention Vidal as one of the preferred tests for typhoid. Education on awareness of doctors is very important on typhoid. Also important is the awareness of community. What we have seen is that the water, sanitation, and hygiene and vaccination are poorly utilized in our country. We are still in the process of introducing the available vaccine for typhoid. We need to strengthen the research and development for development of new drugs and diagnostics. Recently, ICMR floated expression of interest from interested innovators and developers for development of typhoid diagnostics. So ICMR has prioritized development of typhoid diagnostics. So just concluding my comments, while the use of antibiotics can actually help us treat typhoid better, the overuse is contradictory to our intentions, so must be avoided in all situations. I just take this opportunity to mention that all these guidance documents are available on the ICMR website. And especially we have the treatment guidelines on antimicrobial use, which also covers typhoid. And this is available as a downloadable application on ICMR website, which you can download on your iOS or Android platforms and use it. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Kamini. I think it was a very comprehensive overview of the typhoid and what are the status today and the public health challenges and what need to be done. I think few things definitely coming out today is like, generally notion was like it's a more in an urban area, but I think, survey says now probably heading toward rural. And that's the biggest problem is because concept was that the typhoid is basically more of a urban, but I think rural areas are getting affected. So we need to probably focus vaccination more out there. And this is probably one of the findings. It's great. I think we need to look at the healthcare providers to think about it. Then the most important part, we always talk about the point of care devices, which is really not there. And I think all of us are definitely in the need, and I'm sure anybody from the people are working on it. I'm sure ICMR also must be working very diligently on it. Get something at a point of care. Otherwise, blood culture takes its own time, and probably you have new technologies we can, but I think they're not. Nothing is really very foolproof. Everything is like risk for 80%, 70%, and of course, the common symptoms of the fever, so the diagnosis often get delayed. Then I think lastly, very important part you mentioned is about resistance, which is coming up. And the good part is, of course, the chloramphenicol is back, but I think it is, its own, the side effects and contraindications. But I think we need to be very careful about the antibiotic drugs. Thank you so much for giving entire details, and I am sure we look forward as we move forward and some questions will drop in. We'll be definitely asking those questions. With this, I moved to my first question. I think I'll go to Dr. Pandya, sir. And we have already heard of Kami about it, but I think we need to, what are the key challenges in raising public awareness? Because what are the key challenges? Why public? It's been there for many years. And as a healthcare providers, what is our role? So how can we educate the public about the importance of typhoid diagnosis? Dr. Pandya, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Gaur. So I am happy that I can talk on a different topic because I am a subject member of the microbiology, and this topic is related more or less with epidemiology. But I think that I want to talk not on the basic things, whatever we have learned from Dr. Meena Kamini Walia. I want to add something in reference to the typhoid in India, typhoid in my country, typhoid in my family, typhoid in my community. How to control, what are the factors which affect, and how to explain the people. I think that is the question. How to train them, how to explain them that how to control typhoid. So the basic thing in control of typhoid is the what you call it as a awareness. And the basic thing is unawareness in the community. We know well, we have an experience of corona. And awareness to control corona rises within months. Entire India, everybody is aware that how to control it. And nobody is aware how to control typhoid, including educated people to the poorest people. Why don't they want aware? They have no fear. If you have no fear, you will not be aware. And the best awareness is not in what we are discussing. Whatever the control of sanitation, pure water, etc., are covering only 1% of population of India. Yeah, I may be somewhere here or there, but 98% population not aware, and they are living in rural areas. They are poor people. They have no food. They have no facilities. And I have divided, for my sake, just now I have divided the transfer into routine typhoid, number one. Second is the typhoid among travelers, not international traveler. I will talk only for India. Typhoid in travelers, you see railway, bus services, private services, bus stations, railway stations, the food which is being provided, how they prepare, how they serve, and how they provide to us. Not the big trains, the ordinary people who are traveling daily, taking food. It is compulsory for them to take food from the railway station. And the production of the food, nobody knows how they are producing. I simply say about the simplest example is our sandwiches. They are selling in the train. How they cut the cucumbers, you know? How they cut the tomatoes, you know? If you attend any public gatherings or marriage functions, how they prepare salads, you know? It is totally contaminated. How they sell these vegetables, they clean it within totally polluted water, and without washing, the big programs, they will cut it in a very, very unhealthy way and provide to us. Number two, what I want to suggest is we have to take care of the unheated food. Which are the unheated food we are coming across? The biggest unheated food India people are consuming is chutney, green chutney in salads. I think if you carefully analyze, the transmission is maximum with the material which are not heated, which are absolutely not heated. These chutney preparation materials are totally not heated at all. They are crushed and served. Who is handling them is totally dirty person and he touching everywhere. If you see, we have an experience of the severe, more than 400 diarrheal cases. So I suggest this is something different than that. The serving bowl were kept on the floor and the under surface of the floor, or upper surface of the floor and under surface of the bowl carries the organism from mitti to food. And 400 people have a severe diarrhea. I can experience 2 more cases, 2 more epidemics. This is controlled by laboratory. In Gujarat, we have got some more than 100 cases of typhoid detected in one city near Surat. Government tell us to go and analyze what is happening. We analyze people. I as being a person of laboratory person, I just go to the laboratory and ask him that how you are diagnosing. What they are doing, they keep 1 drop of patient serum, 1 drop of antigen, mix it. If you get agglutination, they say it is typhoid. At a titer of 2. There was epidemic, I agree. But the frequency was so high detected, just we diluted the serum and typhoid epidemic decreases. The same thing happened in another city and immediately we concentrated on this particular area. Now another area is, we say, is the recreation, accumulation of people. Holidays, nobody care for anything related to the health services. These are, and recreation, holy places, transportation we have discussed. One more thing I want to tell about typhoid is that most of the people who get typhoid, they don't know they are having typhoid. Number 2, most of the general practitioners immediately starts antimicrobial treatment. I am talking about India as a whole. And 98% of the people are already treated. So the possibility of blood culture positivity you will all experience, it is not as there are number of the patients in the community. Because almost 90% of the patients are treated patients. And in the first week of the disease, this disappear. Number 2, most of the patients are not suffering from intestinal disorders like bleeding, diarrhea. This is because of the long duration of the exposure. It is not happening. And it will not happen even in a poorest person. He will go to a general practitioner, he will take some tablets and the organism disappears. But the toxicity, the side effects, the immunological interactions will continue for a longer time. So the best way, if you start vaccination, I agree, vaccination will control 5% of the typhoid in India. If we want to go for research in typhoid, what I suggest, I just want to make it as short as possible, that we have to analyze surveillance of the fever cases and the baseline titer of the antibodies, number 1. And number 2 is the extensive survey of the public food producers, food handlers, and food sellers. Nobody has any control. Even we have control on medical stores, but we have no control on the vendors, street vendors. This is only one paper control, I know. I think you may agree with me for all these things, because I am not talking about the other things, which is related to what sir want to say. I want to share, these are the things which I want to share for this. About vaccination, I will tell you afterwards. Sir.
Yeah.
So,
thank you so much, Pandey. I think you really touched the base point. And I'm sure I can see Rajiv smiling because he is being from Indian Army and how they have a community kitchen, they have messes, and how diligently they handle. I'm sure he'll be able to share some light on that as we spoke, because this is something which is, yes, travelers, typhoid, I think it's one big area. And I'm sure, I think we have our army also right here. Probably this one awareness point, because travelers and the festive community gatherings, maybe like a drive before the festivals, maybe something like that, we can definitely work out. And it's a very, very important point. We look forward. I think it's a point to be taken. And healthcare provider, it becomes our duty, actually, whenever we go, we tell our people, our patients and our families we adopt and look after, before traveling, take a vaccination, whatever it is, take all precautions, hygiene, and probably the food handlers. I think that's the major focus I think India definitely need, because we have all street foods in all streets. I think that's something. With this, I think I move to my next question to General Rajiv Mohan. Rajiv, thank you so much. And, so I think I like, was we are talking about public health issues. And I think you already heard Dr. Pandya talking about the food handlers and travelers and kitchens. But what factors you to keep in mind before approaching, because that specific diagnostic algorithm, entry fever, that's important because people straight away go for a, medication without really realizing what's really it is. And what if it is delayed? Because I think that's another area. If you tell people that it delayed is a complication, they can, with awareness can be created. And how can they communicate to the public? And of course, the latest tools, because we have a challenge at the point of care. But what are the latest advancements? In brief, can you just talk about it? Dr. Rajiv, please.
Good afternoon to all who are present on board on this VC. Firstly, I would like to substantiate what Dr. Pandya has mentioned. And I think the biggest tool which we have, which we can easily use to prevent, is the best vaccine which we have, which is education. I don't think, I'm sure Dr. Kamini would agree, the more we make people aware, the more we educate, the better we are to handle this whole problem. Anyway, notwithstanding that, as far as diagnosis is concerned, I'm sure, Dr. Veena, can I have my first slide, please? I just have 3 slides. I would just like to summarize this whole 3 parts of my question in those. Yeah, so I hope everybody can see this. So I'm sure all of us would agree that making a correct diagnosis stems from the fact that you need to understand the temporal profile of how the disease develops once the organism enters the human body. And this diagram, I'm not going to go into details, but the fact of the matter is the pathogenesis would determine what is the location of the organism which you are trying to detect, and that would in turn determine what sample you are going to collect. So that is the fundamental behind making a early and a correct diagnosis. Can I have the next slide? Yeah, I'm sure all of people who are here are aware that fundamentally today we have a repertoire of tests, and as everyone before me brought out, these tests are not sufficient. The biggest problem with whether it is blood culture, whether it is bone marrow culture, whether it is a Vidal test for antibody detection, whether it is any other test, the basic problem is the sensitivity and the specificity. And I'm sure all of you would have heard this acronym called BASU, which we all learned during our undergraduate days, that in the first week you do a blood culture or a bone marrow culture. In the second week, you do an antibody test. In the third week, you normally do a stool culture. And in the fourth week, you do a urine culture. But this is just a guideline. And as this diagram suggests, all these tests have their own limitations. Now, coming to the blood culture, like Dr. Kamini very clearly brought out, though blood culture is the gold standard, but please understand, worldwide literature suggests that only 18% of blood culture samples would flag positive for any disease. So you can imagine typhoid is no alien to that. And when it is such a low sensitivity, it is not really an ideal gold standard. So what are the challenges which, brings us to why do we face such a challenge when we want to diagnose or we want to document typhoid fever? So these challenges, as I brought out, the low sensitivity of culture techniques, then we don't really have a non-invasive gold standard. Probably that is the future. We need to research on that. The third important thing which Dr. Pandya brought out, very, very early initiation of antimicrobials. So whatever we can isolate, we are not able to isolate. Fourth, the compounding factor of the low sensitivity and specificity of the Vidal test with post-vaccination serological titers, or even in endemic areas, what is the baseline titer we should take? We are not sure about it. And of course, the carrier state which develops after enteric fever. So these are the challenges. And as was the second part of the question, if you don't diagnose early, if you don't specifically treat early, obviously you're going to land up in complications. So in summary, if we don't treat, if we don't diagnose, by and large, most individuals, almost 30%, would go into complications of enteric fever. And by and large, most of us, we know those. So it is perforation, it is peritonitis, it is hepatitis, it is involvement of the central nervous system. And finally, a patient goes into sepsis and DIC. Hopefully, that should not happen with at least empirical initiation of antimicrobial therapy. But because of antimicrobial resistance, it is a double-edged sword that we are talking about. Now, coming to the final part of the question, where do we go from what we have? So can I have the next slide? So this is something I would like to just spend 2 minutes on. Fortunately for us, PCR as a technology has come a long way, and I'm sure PCR is available as part of a syndromic approach to diarrhea or syndromic approach to fever of unknown origin, syndromic approach to a central nervous system infection. So typhoid is a part of that. But again, the problem with even PCR or conventional or real-time PCR is the specificity of those particular tests which are available as of now on various platforms. So what is likely to happen? So what we want to research on, which is again an ICMR priority area, is how do I catch the organism as early as possible? And how do I concentrate that organism as early as possible in a clinical sample, which probably mostly would be blood. So these are various things which are on the horizon. A lot of work is going on. I'll just go through them one by one in a very brief manner. LAMP, you're all aware of. It is basically an isothermal method of amplification, and it can detect up to even 500 femtograms of Salmonella typhi DNA in a sample. That is the sensitivity. So I'll limit it to that. Then something known as a new technique which enhances the detection of organism. As the name suggests, it basically lyses the organisms in a clinical sample using a microwave. And once the organisms are lysed, then the metal-enhanced fluorescence helps in detection of the organism. It is a research tool. Trials are going on, and I'm sure it will help in improved sensitivity and specificity. Then there is something known as a typhoid paratyphoid test. This fundamentally depends on the ability of the organisms to survive in the monocytes and the reticuloendothelial system. So you separate out the lymphocytes, which takes a long time. So the turnaround time would be more. But these lymphocyte cultures then are a very, very rich harvest from which can specifically isolate the organism because they are concentrated. The next one, which we are all aware, is MALDI-TOF. MALDI-TOF, which is available today, that is whether you have a Bruker system or you have Versatech or whatever, they have their limitations. And now signature patterns of almost 6 metabolites is being developed and tested, which is specific to Salmonella enterica typhi. And I think when it comes up, probably it will be a good way of 100% specificity as far as that is concerned. Another system which is on the horizon, which is an automated system, which is a system which can be taken to the periphery, because like Dr. Pandya brought out, we want something in the periphery. It is not a tertiary care center when we want to make a diagnosis. And this system, of course, depends on that you basically culture the blood in a broth for 6 to 8 hours, and then you have an immunomagnetic concentration or enrichment of the infected cells. And then you use monoclonal antibodies to detect these infected cells. It is very much in trial, and I'm sure if it comes up, it will be a great boon as far as point of care testing, even in a peripheral setup is concerned, as far as sensitivity and specificity is concerned. And finally, something which I have not put on the slide, there is something known as a strip-based diagnosis, which depends on the flagellar antigen. The flagellar antigen, just to take half a second, contains 3 portions. The middle portion of the flagellar antigen is highly specific for each species of Salmonella enterica typhi. And that is what people are now focusing on. And if that comes through, they use monoclonal antibodies and detect this specific antigen, resulting in as a point of care test. So everything is not lost. To Two tests for point of care testing are very much on the horizon. One is this strip-based flagellin antigen test, and the other one is this immunomagnetic cell capture system. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajiv. I think it was a very, very informative. And one of the important thing really, it reminded me of Basu, because that's how medical college learning we have. And I think, I'm sure Dr. Pandya is also talking about it. I think we still remember this 40, 35 years from there. I think that's algorithm stands today. And I think that's the right way, because otherwise we get, multiple sample different time, and it doesn't work. And then they probably miss out the diagnosis. We just follow the algorithm, which has been like Basu stands today. The second important part you talked about, I think, Kamini also mentioned, and we also had heard Pandya talking about the urban or the shifting focus to rural areas. I think the need of point of care. That's a great information. I think all of us really need to be talking about. Now we have a hope, and I think we are really, hoping that whatever the technologies, which is IAMC2 systems, magnetic, they probably come as early as possible. And that becomes a very, very important tool for all of us. There are a lot of things happening into the molecular space, PCR, multiple things that are happening, technologies existing. But what we really need today is equally important is a point of care testing, which is, I am sure you mentioned about it, work is on, relation is on. And I'm sure sooner or later, I think it will be right there, and we will be able to. And the disease growing in rural areas, I think that's where probably application will be very, very important. On rural areas, neighboring clinics, urban slums, which is where I think the challenges are much more there. Thank you. We'd like to hear it from you as you move forward again. My next question is Dr. Vanita Kothari. Good afternoon, Dr. Vanita. I think I'd like to actually, come back. The first question, we already talked about the public awareness. So I think, what role does community level sanitation infrastructure? Because you come from, I think, the place like Indore, which is the most cleanest city in the country. It has been awarded twice, if I'm not wrong. And you have been, you have all across Central India, multiple pathology labs and centers across. You've been screening all kind of programs, public programs, and even wellness programs. So I think, like to throw some light. Are there any specific hygiene practices are particularly effective? How can they be addressed? I think, and what is the situation? Because you have seen the probably era, because now the cleanliness. Anything you like to talk about? How have we, what kind of a role community level sanitation infrastructure improvement is playing a role today, and what can it be in the future? Dr. Vanita, please.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir. So, like you said, Indore has been, for the 6th time, being judged as the cleanest city. And not only that, it is a water plus city. So, in a water plus city, the city maintains cleanliness of river and drain water. Wastewater is released from household treated. And in our city, almost 110 million liters of water are treated every day. And what is important is this example can be taken by various cities of India. We are observing a steep fall in all waterborne diseases, not only typhoid, also cholera, hepatitis, dysentery, etc. So if there's a government bill, which you see in Indore, there can be a substantial reduction in the incidences of preventable disease. We are also observing that in last 3 years, I collected government data and the data of big private labs, and we have seen 1/3 the incidence of typhoid. In our lab, from 38.79% cases, the positivity has reduced to 14.94%, and likewise in the city. So there is a substantial fall in various diseases, also the mosquito-borne. So this is all related to cleanliness. So I think community level sanitation can be the biggest boon for any city, no matter how much we talk. But the government can do a really very important role in preventing the diseases we are talking about. Of course, at an individual level, hand wash, usage of hygienic food and water will help us prevent. We can also, through school and communities and public gathering, ensure that the water used is safe. So that's more of awareness. In our city, even for roadside, we have famous chappan dukan, and we have big roadside food in Sarafa. And the government is very particular in testing periodically the quality of food and putting the certificates on public display. So I think this is one of the very important things which can be followed by other cities. And in mass, the public is benefited.
That's, I think, brilliant. I think that's a live example what we are seeing today, because what simple measures of hygiene and improving the infrastructure and cleanliness can reduce the numbers substantially. And I'm sure this is not only the typhoid, but probably other related diseases like dengue or whatever it is. I'm sure those numbers also must have come down substantially, because I think what we need to follow is a very, very simple dictum: clean surroundings, clean, wash your hands. And I think that's simple awareness. Food handlers and getting screenings probably help us out to reduce the number. Thank you, Vinita, for sharing this information. I think all those listeners who are there in the audience, and I'm sure if you apply the similar kind of a thing, basic precautions will definitely, and create awareness about this. And wherever you are, wherever you travel, wherever you stay in the neighboring community, that will help a lot. I'll come back to, I think, Dr. Kamini. I think before I start, I think because there are a couple of questions in the chat box, question Q&A. Any of you like to answer, please go ahead. Please answer the question. The specific question, Dr. Kamini, for you also is out there. And we have, one question also, one very interesting. We have a very senior microbiologist in the audience. I heard somebody, Dr. Kalpathu Roy, and he has put a very specific question right there. That's something with brucellosis associated with typhoid, role of nanopore. I think any of you like to answer, please go ahead. Then I will move on to my next question, of course, Dr. Pandya, sir. I think we have a little overshooting our time, and so Kamini, we'll ask your views in the last again. But I think I'd like to talk to Pandya. Just quickly, sir, can you enumerate the vaccination? What are the kind of vaccines what we have, and how is this vaccine, about something about booster doses and the usefulness of booster dose, because vaccine we all know, but people forget about booster doses. How does it help? Dr. Pandya, please.
Thank you, sir. In reference to vaccination of the population, the oldest method, the first generation vaccine, the whole cell vaccine. But it has some limitations as due to the interactions and due to the contraindications in different things, and especially it produces various types of side effects. So we can switch over to the conjugate vaccines and whole cell vaccines, cell VI vaccines. VI is the outer coat, that is a carbohydrate moiety of the organism can be combined with. I will directly switch over to the recent advances or recent trends, because next generation vaccines, I want to tell 2 or 3 things. One is known as GMMA. That is the generalized module of membrane antigens. The membrane antigens are said by intervening with the organism, and these antigens, when they are said, they can be collected. They are proteins as well as carbohydrates. So in combination, they elicit first IgM, and then also it can be used for the future vaccinations. Second is the PCMV, that is a protein capsule matrix vaccine. This is also generating new ideas in reference to the newer generation vaccine. And the last one is the multivalent vaccine, where we can combine not only Salmonella typhi, but it's a combination with para and B. And one thing is that co-administration of vaccine with other vaccines will not interfere the action of other vaccine or its own vaccine. So it is acceptable that we can co-vaccinate with other vaccines also, and they will not intervene with each other. But especially when the vaccination is concerned. So if we make a surveillance of vaccinated person and non-vaccinated person in a population, I think these type of survey will tell us that what is the present status of vaccinated persons in India or in particular area. So first we will take a small area then we can switch over to the taluka level, then we switch over to the jilla level, then we switch over to the state level, and we find out, is there any? We are talking too much, but where is the situation? How many people are taking vaccine? They hardly take polio vaccines. It takes a lot of pain to give the oral polio vaccine, which is also non-invasive, and injectable vaccines to the children. I think if you go to the rural population, they generally don't agree. We will try to find out the present status, and then we can make the programs that how to implement it, especially oral vaccination in the form of capsule and liquids are also available, and we have to find out the efficacy of the vaccine. One more thing I want to tell you in this all this discussion is that the simplest way to differentiate typhoid cases in a rural area where an ordinary RMP or MBBS or GP are doing work, how to differentiate typhoid from others. Over and above fever, the simple we can say there is a leukopenia in typhoid, and dirty throat is the basic direction. So we simply go to the baseline and tell them that differentiate only dirty throat with fever people, and then we can concentrate for diagnosis. So that will again decrease our sample number to work out. I think we can talk on this on another discussion, or it will be useful for future of prevention of typhoid in India. I think I am more interested in India and poor people and rural areas where we can control typhoid. Thank you, sir. Thank you for inviting me.
I think, sorry, I was on mute. I think, thank you, Dr. Pandya, for sharing this information. I think we understand vaccination. I think that's important. I think one more important point you mentioned when you, the previous question was like awareness. I think two combination of that. Again, the vaccination awareness, the way it was done, collaborated by all authorities, all stakeholders in COVID. I think if this kind of a moment happens, and it's happening, I'm sure, very all levels, but I think it's concentrated effort, collaborating efforts of us, all stakeholders, probably we can get away at least the mortality part, and the numbers probably would, because it's not only mortality, it's like the productivity, morbidity, and the chronic complication and productivity of the individual, absence from the, like the workplaces, and it really affects the common. There are some stigmas I've heard in the rural areas. They still talk about those stigmas. Typhoid is something isolated individual. But I think all this is definitely needed today, and probably it's drive vaccination and awareness can help. My next question, I go to straight to Rajiv. I think because we're running short of time. One is like, despite vaccination, we find people getting typhoid, and could be the reason and what measures to take, because I think no vaccination is true, but still like, because that's something Rajiv, like to share lights on that.
So I think it basically stems from the basic serological, variants of the organism. If you see, what are we giving in the vaccine? We are basically either addressing the polysaccharide capsular antigen, or we are addressing the somatic O antigen, or we are addressing the VI antigen. Now, unfortunately, these are not highly conserved, if I may put it in a very simple term. And that is the reason why actually even the Vidal test also fails, because the spectrum of antigenic exposure which the immune system gets, it produces a myriad of spectrum of antibodies. And that's why we are not sure as to what is really specific and what is really non-specific. So what we are talking about here is the breakthrough infections. Now, if you basically look at vaccination, it can be fundamentally divided into two. Either it is a sterilizing vaccine, which are very few in the world, even today in the history of medicine, which means you give the vaccine and you stop transmission. By and large, it would usually not happen, what we have seen from history. So what we do actually is a therapeutic vaccination, which means fundamentally that you are preventing transmission to some extent, but indirectly also preventing transmission by reducing morbidity, mortality, shedding of the organisms in various samples, etc., etc. So basically the problem is with the variation in the antigenic structure of the organism, the repertoire of the immune response which these vaccines produce. And I'm sure, as Dr. Pandya brought out, they are looking at more and more conserved specific regions which can create a neutralizing antibody kind of a response, if I may call it. and then probably the vaccines would become more efficacious. So I think I'll just summarize it with that because of paucity of time.
Thank you so much. I think very correctly answered. I think maybe the strains, the variants which are out there, probably I'm sure we go forward. We have a technologies also to contain that vaccine, and development always keeps happening. Thank you, Dr. Rajiv. And one of the questions what I saw in the chat box was what the first line treatment for the audience. I think it's already there. Dr. Kamani has mentioned it's already there in the ICMR protocol, and I'm sure anybody can probably look into it, and that's available for public. The last question, Dr. Vanita. You have you've done a lot of wellness programs and you do a lot of screening programs and public health awareness programs. What are the most effective communication channels? That's important in today's era. You found the reaching wide audience and probably people can understand. And what's your suggestion? What's your experience? What can you suggest today so that public gets more awareness and more awareness is created? Vanita, please.
So, sir, when we almost screened 165,000 people for lifestyle diseases, we used all the possible channels. I will just share a few which really worked well. So we involved local district government, we involved public, and we involved the politicians also. Because if everyone talks together and if there's a common will, things become much easier in communicating. So the most effective ways we found were meeting various communities, various groups. So we were available to all the groups in physical form, giving a talk and explaining the things. So I observed that whenever we talk to them and explain, and after that people get quite motivated. Just a theoretical message doesn't work that much. So one way is communicating. We can ourselves train the teachers and make a group who can in turn talk about typhoid. In medical community also, we talk about rare diseases and we have many conferences on rare things, but we rarely talk about very common things like typhoid, and that's how it is misdiagnosed. So that is the place where we can talk. We use print media a lot, and we held a lot of press conference and kept communicating the results we were getting so that people get motivated and are aware. We use radios, and in our city, the waste is collected from every household by a government vehicle, which has a recording system. So we gave them the voice record, and then they would play it on every street of Indore. So that is another way, very effective way where it can be used if there are government vehicles available. It instantly reaches every household. And of course, on phone, we recorded and sent. We use poster, banners, billboards, everything. So every possible, but I found addressing the groups as one of the very effective channels for this.
Thank you so much. I think, yes, what I understood basically is awareness, awareness, awareness. And equally important is the collaboration. I think all stakeholders coming together have a very clear understanding. We all probably know at the top level, this is what needs to be done. But I think all of us joining hands together and probably translating and executing the ground, make sure it reaches in the language of what the rural guys or the last man of the post understands. And that's very, very equally important. So whatever media is required, whether the print media, the radio, or maybe today we have social media, we have mobiles, any messages probably will work. And I think that's probably the wisdom what we're sharing. Now, I think my last, I'll come back now, Dr. Kamini. Your views, because you've heard all of us, and anything you'd like to add on, anything you'd like to suggest, anything we'd like to hear from you before we close the webinar. Kamini, please.
Thank you, Dr. Gaur. This was a very rich discussion, I think. And I agree with Dr. Vinita that, creating awareness and what she suggested, that we should be doing to create awareness, the different governments should be doing, the state government and from the central government. I mean, we haven't seen a very strong campaign on the importance of having having clean water, clean food in a long time. We really haven't seen it. We see campaigns on responsible disposal of garbage. we saw one of the very effective campaigns on COVID, when you would call someone and somebody would start coughing, and everyone knew, that there was a campaign on that. But then one thing which I want to just comment here is that antibiotics is a finite resource. It is not an infinite resource. And we are now realizing it because the pipeline for new antibiotics is running dry. So to rationalize the antibiotic use for typhoid, first is that we have to prevent the disease. So by clean water, awareness and education. Second is that we have to improve the specificity and rationalize the treatment and stop the misuse of antibiotics. And for that, we need good diagnostic. And thirdly, I think we need to also educate the doctors on what is the responsible prescribing and how they should be using the diagnostics. So it is, I think, a holistic effort which is needed to first prevent the infections and then treat the infections properly, realizing fully well that we may not have the infinite treatment options for typhoid.
Thank you. That's a very nice message. Like, be careful. This is not like we don't have infinite. Probably we may finish off our options. Then what will we do? I think equally important, very important point you mentioned, not only the patients, but I think it's important to educate our doctors, because this is something which is what Pandya also mentioned, because day one, they start the treatment on all kind of antibiotics which is creating havoc. In any case, we need to not only care about typhoid, the challenges, the complication, but I think equally important is the you can talk about the antimicrobial or the drug resistance, which is developing. And if this develops, I think God save all of us. And I'm sure we are all here to make sure that message goes at every doorstep. Let's not pop up antibiotic the way we are taking today. It'll create havoc all across. Thank you for saying so. I think one important question, I think for you, can maybe one line you can share. Like, do you think the knowing blood culture, of course, the gold standard going forward? Somebody has put in the chat box, right? Molecular test replacing, I don't see that in any case. Replacing, they could be in a sub, probably an addendum. But anything, Rajiv or Amni, like to add on that?
So for surveillance, and for understanding what kind of mechanisms of resistance are there, of course, today also we use whole genome sequencing. We are using different platforms. But what we are looking is a solution which is available in the field, in the community, which can help improve antimicrobial prescribing. And for that, these kind of techniques is not an answer. We need point of care tests. Over to Dr. Rajiv.
Yeah, so just to summarize in one word, what ma'am has said is perfectly, applicable to anything. Yes, blood culture does need a replacement as a gold standard. It is not the ideal gold standard. Now, with what is where we are, today, because ultimately, like she brought out, surveillance is a very different ballgame. But unless you diagnose rapidly and correctly and early, you are going to not be able to stop the disuse or misuse or whatever you may call of empirical therapy. And that is what drives the whole process again back to square one. So what they are looking at are point of care tests, which could be used as gold standards. It is a work in progress. Let us hope it works out for us.
Thank you so much for everyone for sharing your wisdom. I think the kind assurance, giving us hope, and making sure that we are aware of what we are doing, and we are sure whatever we are aware is communicated well to the healthcare, the providers, the patients, and everybody out there. I think before I close, I like to just summarize at the thought, like a couple of lines. Why you ask for typhoid threat concern? That is something very important today, because it strikes with fever, weakness, and despair. A perilous dance is crucial. We are all aware. From days of ancient battles to the present, we have come. Yet typhoid's silent presence leaves many of us feeling numb. Through science's tireless effort, vaccines and drugs device, we have journeyed far. Yet in its grip, some lives are still capsized. That's a very big worry today. Now, what could be done probably? The prevention whispers through the cleansing stream, where soap and water join the tandem gleam. In this simple act, we find our way to keep the typhoid menace at bay. Vaccines as allies stand strong and tall to halt the spread, protect one and all. Awareness matters. Let us all dance, declare for in the knowledge lies our shield and care. I think that's what I'd like to sum up with that. Thank you, every one of you, and I think sparing your time, will your wisdom. Thank you, Dr. Kamini, Dr. Pandya, Dr. Rajiv, and Dr. Vanita Utari. And of course, thank you, Dr. Veena, and Vanguard for giving us this very important topic, which is today, in fact, it's there in every neighborhood clinics. Probably we have seen that, but we've still not been able to address it. Work is on, hope is on, and I'm sure we'll find a solution to that. Thank you very much, Dr. V. Over, Dr. Veena, please.
What a varied and insightful discussion this has been, wherein such complex facts were shared with so much simplicity. Thank you so much, Dr. Kamini, Dr. Vinita, Dr. Pandya, Dr. Gupta, and a very special thanks to you, Dr. Gaur, for moderating all the 3 episodes of this webinar series on typhoid with so much skill, and to add poetry in your signature style at each time. It's truly engaging. And of course, our gratitude is due, lastly and most importantly, to all the participants who've engaged with us throughout this webinar series. And it's therefore goodbye to each one of you till we meet at our next webinar series. So stay safe and stay typhoid free.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks a lot.